Broadcast Network family, GMAP1.com, GMAP Broadcast Network, yours truly. Pastor Kevin here, along with Francis. And of course, you know what, Francis, how you doing today?
I'm great, Pastor Kevin, and I am so excited to have a chance to talk with you and all of your wonderful listeners.
Oh my goodness, and not as grateful and happy as I am because I tell you, I'm grateful to have you here. And thank you so much for accepting the invitation to be here with us on today and to be a part of our broadcast network family. And of course, allowing us to be a part of your journey. Introduce yourself. Tell us who you are. Tell us where you're from if you don't mind sharing.
Oh, I'd love to. As I thought about how does one introduce oneself, I thought, oh, I should try to think of something really clever, like what Bilbo Baggins said when he introduced himself to the dragon, Smog,
Wow.
and maybe give you a riddle.
Oh my
And when I thought about that, I thought, okay, I could tell your listeners that I'm in a family that is evening, noon, and morning. And maybe they would guess that I'm part of a three-generation family. And I feel very blessed and fortunate to be the grandmother, the mother, and I've enjoyed one of my primary roles as being a parent. I'm also an educator, but and an author, but I like to think of myself now as the person who writes stories for kids that keep them up after the lights are out and they don't even know that they're learning.
wow.
So I was reared in Western Oklahoma and have devoted all of my career to children and young people, either as a classroom teacher or a professor or as an author. So that's the amended version of who is Francis Schoonmaker.
Mm. Well, you spoke briefly about you being an author. Why don't you tell us about that? I mean, I'm sure that you can share with our viewers and listeners the great publication that you have been blessed to release to the people around the world. Tell us a little bit about it, if you don't mind.
At the dawn of time, three crystals were set aside for the healing and the repair of the earth. They were placed in the care of immortal twins, but one of the twins betrayed the trust, stole the crystals, and has used all of them for her own evil purposes until only one remains. I've written a trilogy that is historical fantasy. And in the trilogy, the theme that holds all three books together, the children who are the protagonists have no idea that the crystal exists until something happens and they're drawn in to an epic quest to find it. In the first book, and that's the one I'm going to talk about today because it's the featured book, the Black Alabaster Box, we find Grace, who has never had her metal tested. She's grown up in St. Louis. Her father's a doctor, and he and her mother have a dream, kind of like the dream you had, Kevin, when you began this radio network.
Mm.
But it was a dream to start medical school. And so they want to go west. It's 1856. They're going to take the Santa Fe Trail. Grace does not want to go. And even though the story depends on magic, Grace does not believe in magic. She doesn't even believe in magic when old Shep, a black and white dog, shows up at the door 2 days before they're supposed to leave after a 10-year absence. Her mother says it can't be the same dog because dogs don't live that long. He'd have to be 150 years old. But even then, Grace doesn't believe in magic. And so they leave for the trail, and she's just beginning to adjust to life going west, which isn't easy, but it had its moments when smallpox sweeps the wagon train. And her own mother comes down with the pox, and their wagon has to pull off the trail. And Grace goes to sleep one night, worried about her mom, and wakes up the next morning to find that she has been kidnapped in the night and is taken deep into Oklahoma territory where she's made to work like a drudge.
Mm.
And that's when Grace has to decide if she's going to cave into despair or if she's going to pull up her socks and take action to try to find her parents. And when she takes action, she discovers the quest and she finds that there's more to Grace than she realized. And she finds there are people who will help her in the most unexpected of places, and that there are some things that only a child can do.
Mm.
So, Grace, who has always had a blessed life and been graced, suddenly becomes a grace to other people.
Wow.
And I don't want to tell you much more because I really hope that listeners will want to get the book and read it for themselves.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I know that it's going to be a fabulous read for myself as well as our viewers and listeners. Now, is this particular publication a follow up to something that you have previously written, or is this your first release?
The Black Alabaster Box was the first release, but really went about this backward. Years ago, when I was teaching elementary school, um, the family made a trip west from Baltimore to Sacramento, California by car. And I'm happy to report that we were all still speaking at the end of the trip. but, but that's a very taxing trip. And we followed along some of the trail, the Santa Fe Trail. And of course, I couldn't help but think of that, having grown up in Western Oklahoma, not so awfully far from where the Santa Fe Trail cuts through to New Mexico. But I met an uncle in law for the first time, and he told about how he and his little brother were put on the train every summer, and they made the trip to San Francisco all by themselves, no supervision. And I just kept, I'd been an elementary school teacher. And a parent. I kept thinking, yay, what,
Wow.
what would two little guys get up to on a trip like that? And that story just nagged at me. And I began working on it, but put it aside because as a teacher and teacher educator, I couldn't carve out space to work on it. But I also couldn't find a motive that was um, powerful enough to drive what began to emerge in my head as a quest story. I ended up writing book 3 of the trilogy first, but I wasn't ready to let go, um, even though I had found my motive. Um, I kept thinking about, well, how come this happened? How come that happened?
Right.
And my daughter, who has a background in teaching theater, said, a really good actor always thinks about the backstory before he or she really develops a character. And before you step on stage, you may not show any of that backstory to an audience, but it's there. It informs the way you act. And I kept thinking, well, what's the backstory? And I ended up backing up to the Santa Fe Trail. And because the third book starts on the Santa Fe Chief train, then I thought, well, okay, let's follow the Santa Fe Trail. And so the first book in the trilogy, The Black Alabaster Box, follows the Santa Fe Trail all the way to um, probably the midpoint before Grace is kidnapped and and then leaves the trail.
Wow. Well, I am really excited about this particular publication. Now, when is it that we can anticipate receiving the other two publications of the trilogy?
I'd love to talk to you about those, if not today, certainly another time. But all 3 books are out. The second book, in the second book, The Red Abalone Shell, uh, James, the protagonist, finds himself on the steps of a little church in a town in western Oklahoma. and he has no idea how he got there or who he is. The only clues he has he remembers his name is James. He has an old map, a red abalone shell, and a dog named Old Shep. And maybe that dog rings a bell because
Wow.
the dog is the dog that appeared to Grace.
Wow.
Um, and in that book, set right at the cusp of the United States entering World War One, um, James is adopted by a German American pacifist family, and emotions run very high during that period. And interestingly to me, because this is historical fantasy and I do the historical research in developing the books, but interestingly enough, the prototype for what the United States did during World War II in the internment camps that held the Japanese um, Americans was actually set in World War One as German Americans and Italian Americans were rounded up, put in camps, and those who weren't had to take loyalty oaths. So in the book, James has to decide what his stance will be.
Mm,
And in the process of making those decisions, he's drawn into a quest for the last crystal.
wow. Well,
Uh,
I
in the third, yeah, go ahead,
no, no,
Kevin.
no. I am just really, I'm just overwhelmed with joy, and I am going to anticipate that all of our viewers and listeners, of course, if you don't know now, you know, Francis is one of our featured authors on the GMAP Broadcast Network, GMAP1.com. You can always stop by and click on the tab that simply is titled Featured Authors. You will see a copy of the current publication that I'm showing you on our split television screen. It will take you to the necessary location to get all the intimate details and information about the author as well as the publication. Now, I'm going to anticipate that you are going to allow me to have those other two publications on our broadcast network platform also want to be able to share the beginning to the end or to this point with all of our viewers and listeners around the world. And I know that there's going to be quite a few individuals that want to show their love, care, concern, and support and reach out and go out and purchase a copy of this publication as well as the other two. What would be the process for them to do so? How can this book be purchased from our viewers and listeners today?
Well, there are several ways. One, I'm a real fan of independent bookstores. So if you have a local independent bookstore that you like, you go there and ask for the book. They'll get it for you. Um, so that would be one way. You can also order it online from an independent bookstore by going to indiebooks.com, or just type in your search engine independent bookstores and it will take you where you need to go. And it is on all the traditional internet sites. You can buy it in the US on Amazon, in the UK on Amazon. You can buy it at Barnes and Noble, Walmart, even Target. Um, in bookstores in the United Kingdom, you can get it at local stores like Waterstones, which is um, local to the UK. Or you can go to Book Depository, which will allow you to send it anywhere in the world.
Well, of course, we want to make sure that they don't forget about little old GMAP Broadcast Network down here in the lower left hand corner of everything in small print, of course. But you do realize that small print is the most important print on the paper. So we don't mind accepting that title, of course. And if you do decide to make your purchase through a location such as Amazon, we always want to encourage our viewers to make sure you take a few extra moments to leave a review. Leave a review. It's so important to the author, to Amazon, to myself, as well as other viewers and listeners around the world. We want to make sure that you show Frances all of your love, care, concern, and support. Let her know what you think. Let her know how you feel. Let her know that she should and must continue to do what she's doing by releasing these great publications to people around the world. Now, let's just say that some of the individuals that we may, in fact, be encouraging and motivating and inspiring them, and they wanted to reach out and maybe talk to you on a more individual basis. Is there some contact information that you don't mind sharing with us today?
Absolutely. Please do go to my website, and it will be fschoonmaker.com, and you can see on the screen how to spell that. If you lose track, or if you're driving and you don't want to have a car accident, we don't want you to either, then you can always enter the Last Crystal trilogy in a search engine, and you can find my website that way. But that's the quickest way because there are buy links on that. But to contact me, you can contact through the website, uh, Fran at Schoonmaker, fschoonmaker.com. So there is, you can also sign up for my newsletter, or if you get too much email and you don't want to be reading another newsletter, that doesn't offend me because I get a lot of email too. Sign up for the mailing list. And then if a new book is coming out, or if I'm going to be somewhere speaking, then you can be the first to know. And then I'll also try to have some little bonuses or surprises that make it kind of fun to sign up.
Wow.
But I really love to hear from readers, and I love to hear from boys and girls. In
Wow.
fact, a lot of kids take pictures of themselves reading one of the books and send them. And then, with their parents' permission, always with their parents' permission, I often post those on my social media. But I would always respect parents' wishes along those lines.
Right. Wow. Well, when someone takes the opportunity to share that they appreciate who you are, what you're doing, where you've been, and where you are, they may in fact look at you today and say, "Well, I really appreciate what Fran is doing and where she's been and where she is today." But if they were to approach you and say, "What's next for Frances Schoonmaker?" What would your response be to that?
Oh, I've got lots of projects. that I'm currently working on a book that is a spinoff of one of the characters in the Black Alabaster Box. And I'm doing that because the children asked me to. I'm a retired academic. I spent years directing a teacher preparation program at Teachers College at Columbia University. And that was a program that focused heavily on literature and helping young people going out to teach to really appreciate how much a good story can do for kids. And when I taught school, I read a lot of books with and to children. So, one of the things I did when I was writing the books is pilot them with classrooms. And in almost all of the cases where they were piloted, and I chose very different schools, really challenging urban schools full of all sorts of wonderful kids, and suburban schools, and um, but almost universally, the kids who read the first draft of the Black Alabaster Box said, "Could you write us one that doesn't have the fantasy, that goes all the way to California?" Well, that blew me away. And, as someone who was trained in historical methodology and whose research as an academic often involved historical studies, I was so excited about that, to think that somehow the book had gotten a hold of them enough in its draft form that they wanted more of the history. And that's terribly important right now because we're rethinking that history. In the past, we have imagined that the Great Western Migration was kind of like a John Wayne movie, or maybe a camping holiday with the inconvenience of a few attacks by Native Americans who were portrayed in a very unfavorable light. And we're learning more about that now. We realize that it was a very diverse experience, and that wagon trains were made up of people from all walks of life who were looking for a better life, and who were, in many cases, in fact, most, oblivious to what was happening to the people who were being displaced by the fact that they wanted a better life. And one of the characters in the Black Alabaster Box is a freed black man, because this is just prior to the Civil War, who is going west with his family. He's a retired Army scout, and he interacts with Grace, and in fact ends up teaching her some life skills without which she would not have survived her ordeal. So I'm so excited to be able to write a book about a kid who's going to go west, and it's going to kind of brush up against the fantasy, but it's historical,
Wow.
and it won't, it won't engage in the fantasy
Right.
that the trilogy engages in. So it looks like it's going to be a series, and I'm just finishing the first draft, and it's in the hands of friendly critics or critical friends, who will give me the feedback that's really so important when you're doing that kind of work.
Right.
And I've sent it out to multiple um, sources, because this book, I want to focus on what prompted his family to go west. And I situate them in southern Illinois, um, one of the border states. And unbeknownst to Sid Johnson, who's the protagonist, his parents are hosting or conductors on the Underground Railroad. He doesn't know that. And he discovers it just before bounty hunters burn their barn, and they realize that they're no longer going to be able to be a stop on the railroad. Of course, we know what we know now about the railroad was that it shifted constantly for reasons similar to that, and for others, but also just because of the complexity of the networks that were set up to help people find freedom. So that gives me a chance to really explore some of the dynamics that were going on, and his mistaken notion that when they do go west, they'll be leaving all of that behind.
Yeah. Wow.
So I'm very excited about that, and that's going to be at least 3 books. I don't know if I write in trilogies. That may have to do with my um,
Ah,
Christian
yeah.
upbringing.
Ooh, wow. I
Trinitarian thinking or something, but in any case, that, and then because I'm currently broadcasting from Stratford upon Avon in the UK, I'm also taking notes about another mystery for kids that I'm hoping to cast here in Shakespeare's home turf, and I'm thinking that's going to be set in about the 70s. I'm that's still swirling around in my head. So I've got lots of projects going on, people, and I would be so delighted if you come aboard my mailing list and interact and let me know your thoughts.
wow. Well, I am more than sure that you're going to get some outstanding feedback from not this particular publication, but from all of the publications that you are allowing people to enjoy by releasing and disseminating them to people around the world. I'm excited that you took time to be here with us today. I'm excited that you made that decision to accept the invitation to be a part of our broadcast network family. I'm excited that you have allowed us to be a part of your journey. I know for a fact that we are going to be inviting you back a few times to learn more about the other publications that are currently out there for the viewers and listeners to enjoy. We're going to want to hear more about them as well. So we will be inviting you back. I'm going to ask you, may I please have those other 2 publications that are a part of this trilogy, allow them to be a part of our broadcast network and place them on our site for the viewers and listeners to enjoy, receive, and know that they're out there for their convenience and their enjoyment. So I'm going to ask you that, and the record button is on, Francis. So I want you to know that I can rewind the tape and press play over and over again. But we would love to have those publications on our platform as well. May I do that? May we have those 2 publications?
Absolutely. When I made my first trip to Ireland with my mother and daughter years ago, the people we met said, Ireland is full of friends you haven't met. And we were friends, Kevin. We hadn't met.
Ah, great.
But I wanted to say one thing to your listeners that I think could be very important to you, because I know the work that you're hosting, um, you know, it does require support. And one way that listeners can support you in your work is to sign up to on Amazon to make the station um, get a benefit every time they buy a book.
Ah,
So if you can, I've signed up for a particular ministry in New York that feeds homeless people and provides shelter for people. And so every time I buy a book on Amazon, I buy it through, I think it's called Amazon Smile. So, but listeners who would like to make that little extra contribution to what you're doing into your um, radio and television and network ministry, that would be a great way to do it.
yeah, yeah. Wow. And I thank you for that. And I'm going to make sure that I look more in detail
Mm-hmm.
about that because that sounds like an outstanding idea. And of course, again, we're going to be inviting you back. We cannot go on and we cannot let you go without at least saying hello and sending our love and our shout out to Lynn Slaughter, who is just tremendously supportive to our platform as well as you. She is so honored. She's listening today, I'm sure. She
Oh,
told
hi,
me, said,
Lynn.
yeah, she told me she would. She said, I'm going to be tuned in. And I let her know that we're going to have Frances on tomorrow at 11. And she said, I am going to make sure to be listening and tuned in to show up my support for her. She is truly becoming a dear, dear friend. And I thank you, Kevin, for allowing us to speak at the time you did because I hadn't heard her voice for a little while and it was great to hear from her. So, and she was excited to know that you have become a part of our family as well as herself. And she says, keep doing what you're doing because you're doing an outstanding job. Francis, we are definitely going to be inviting you back to share more about what you're doing, to share more about what's yet to come. We are so excited for what you have decided to do, and that's place these publications out to the eyes and ears of the people. So thank you, and thank you for that. Before I let you go, I just want you to come on one last time, and I'm going to move over and allow you to just share exactly what's on your heart. I'm moving over and tell you, Francis Schoonmaker, the floor is yours.
Thank you. One of the things I think that as parents and grandparents and friends of family um, need to think about is that there are so many books out there for young people and for especially the grade that both Lynn Slaughter and I have targeted in the book she most recently discussed and that I'm talking about. That middle grade, which can basically from 10 um, through 15, 16. Although I have to tell you, my oldest fan is 98 years old. So, a good middle grade book read is fun for anybody. A good story is for everyone. But there are so many books, and many of the books that are targeted for kids and that they like a lot are very violent in their orientation. And I think it's important to give them a balanced diet. Life is violent enough. And while on the one hand, it's reassuring to think that, superheroes can come save us, that whole idea that a protagonist, a superhero, needs to come along and kill our enemies, before they kill us, to assume and imagine that when we meet other is going to be enemy and not friend. I think that's dangerous. We can become hooked on violence. So if you're, I mean, there are some wonderful superhero stories, and kids do like them, but find some balance. Not I would not ever imagine that life on the Santa Fe Trail was not violent, and in the book, there are some things that happen that are extremely violent. But I took a vow in writing these books to be truthful to the history in as much as we know the history, but to also refuse to splash blood on the reader. So while some terrible things happen, realistic things happen, I really do not go into detail that I don't think is useful for the reader without backing away from the difficulty. But it's also why I don't recommend the Black Alabaster Box for children under 10. It's a great family read. And if you want to read it with your family and their younger children, that's a safe space in which you can do so. But it's a great book for you to read with the kids and to talk about some of the issues that come up. And when I say I write books that keep kids reading after the lights are out, um, the books are adventure and fantasy, which kids love. But I have made that a point. And I suppose the most important point I try to make, well, twofold. One, there are things that children can do that adults can't do because they have more imagination. And so when I say that Grace discovers there are some things only a child can do, that's why I'm saying it. And in the book, Grace asks a question that nobody has thought to ask before that unlocks the alabaster box that holds the last crystal. So that's one really important thing. But the other is that superheroes are not going to come in and solve our problems for us, that we will do more to care for our earth and for each other through acts of kindness and love and cooperation than we will ever get from waiting for somebody to come bail us out. And kids can be a part of that. So I hope that the message I have for children is empowering, but that it's fun. Because, if it's no fun, what's the point?
Wow.
And so that would be the message I'd want to leave all of you with, that kindness and caring and approaching other as self and not enemy are so important, especially in our world today.
Wow. Well, I appreciate those words. And I know for a fact that many of our viewers and listeners appreciate you sharing that as well. I look forward to having you back soon. I'll be reaching out and making that happen. Until next time, we want you to continue to be blessed and be a blessing to others. You continue to place this information, these publications out to the eyes and ears of the people. We're going to do everything we can to make sure that we assist you in some way, shape, form, or fashion to help you do so. You can always reach out to us, give us a call, text, chat, tweet. The answer will always be yes, and you will never, ever have to ask us twice. We thank you so much, Francis, for being here. I'll be reaching out to you shortly to let you know where we go from here. And of course, if you missed any part of this conversation, you'll be able to see it on our YouTube channel, Facebook. It will be airing on our weekly Comcast cable program. We're going to try to put it on every radio station that we can, and we're going to continue to do what we can to show our support for this awesome young lady. And of course, for our viewers and listeners, we want to make sure that you get and receive those things which you are scheduled and blessed to receive. Thank you so much, Francis, for being here. You have an outstanding rest of your day, a wonderful weekend, and we look forward to speaking with you again soon, okay?
Oh, thank you so very much.
God bless you.